Look, I know how this is going to sound. I really do. But you have to understand the whole picture before you judge me. You can't just look at the final shattered pieces on the floor and decide who swung the hammer. Sometimes a thing is broken long before it falls apart. My name is Ava and I'm 32 years old. 4 years ago, when I married Owen, we were invincible. He was a brilliant, hungry financial analyst, and I was making a name for myself in the cutthroat art world of Chicago. We were a team. We lived in a tiny apartment with peeling paint, dreaming of gallery openings and stock market triumphs. We were fueled by cheap wine and the absolute certainty that we were going to conquer the world together. And we did. In a way, Owen's brain, the one that saw patterns in market fluctuations that looked like chaos to everyone else, got him noticed. He was promoted to a quantitative strategist. A quant. The title sounded sterile and distant, and it turned out to be a prophecy. The man who used to debate the merits of a Rothko painting with me for hours now came home and spoke a language of algorithms and predictive models. He loved the clean, cold logic of his job. He loved that numbers didn't have moods or unmet needs. Our beautiful, vibrant life slowly faded to grayscale. He was a good husband on paper. He paid the bills. He remembered my birthday. He'd ask, "How was your day?" while scrolling through market reports on his phone, his eyes never leaving the screen. He was physically present, a warm body across the dinner table in our sprawling downtown condo, but mentally he was a million miles away. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I'd be telling him about a difficult client or the thrill of acquiring a new piece for the gallery, and he'd give these distracted nods. A polite, empty sound in the back of his throat. But God forbid I didn't listen with rapt attention when he explained some breakthrough in high-frequency trading. I tried. I really did. But it was like listening to someone read a dictionary in a foreign language. The silence in our home grew louder every day. It was a suffocating, heavy thing. And then there was Caleb. Caleb wasn't a plan. He was a happening. He was a major client, a collector with an eye for emerging artists and a smile that could disarm armies. We'd been working together for months, and the professional line had blurred so slowly I didn't even see it coming. Unlike Owen, when Caleb asked about my day, he listened. He'd lean forward, his eyes locked on mine, and ask follow-up questions. He remembered the name of the artist I was championing. He laughed at my stories. He made me feel seen. He made me feel like the witty, intelligent, passionate woman I used to be instead of just the well-maintained accessory to Owen's success. It started with coffee, then lunch, then drinks after a successful auction that lasted a little too long. One rainy Tuesday, sitting across from him in a dimly lit bar, watching him hang on my every word, I felt a spark I thought had died years ago. He was everything Owen wasn't. Spontaneous, emotionally present, genuinely curious about me. That night when he walked me to my car, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was a statement. And in that moment, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I felt like I could finally breathe again. I told myself it wasn't an affair, it was a lifeline. I deserved to feel wanted. I deserved to feel a pulse. And if my own husband couldn't be bothered to check for one, then I would find it somewhere else. The thing about keeping secrets is that they make you a detective in your own life. You become hyper-aware of schedules, of routines, of the slightest deviation from the norm. And as I juggled my compartmentalized life, the vibrant, thrilling hours with Caleb and the quiet, sterile evenings with Owen, I started to notice things. My guilt, a tiny, persistent hum in the back of my mind, needed a place to go, and it found a target. It began with a feeling, a prickle on my skin. You see, my intuition has always been my superpower. In the gallery, I could sense which client was bluffing, which artist was about to break big. I knew our upstairs neighbors were having problems weeks before the moving trucks arrived. My gut has never ever been wrong. And my gut was screaming at me that something was off with Owen. He started working later. A new project, he'd say, his voice flat. He started taking his phone with him into the bathroom. He'd get texts at odd hours and angle the screen away from me. He started showering the moment he got home from work, a new ritual he claimed was to de-stress. Classic signs. Every single one of them. Here I was feeling guilty for my small emotional escape, while my supposedly loyal, predictable husband was likely doing the exact same thing. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The antisocial numbers nerd had found someone else. probably some data analyst who found his talk of standard deviations thrilling. The anger began to eclipse my guilt. How dare he? How dare he let our marriage wither on the vine from his neglect, only to go and water someone else's garden? I started hunting. Not for an explanation, but for confirmation of what I already knew. I'd check his laptop when he was asleep. The browser history was always clean. Too clean. I'd go through his pockets. Nothing. He was good. He was methodical. Of course he was. He applied the same cold logic to his affair as he did to his job. For weeks I was a coiled spring of righteous fury. I was a better wife to him during this time in a twisted way. My needs were being met by Caleb, so I wasn't as needy or frustrated with Owen. I played the part of the dutiful wife, all while gathering invisible evidence in my mind. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I found the credit card statement tucked into his desk drawer, and there it was, in black and white. A charge from a restaurant I'd never heard of. The Gilded Sparrow. A table for two for $187. On a Tuesday afternoon. A Tuesday he had told me he was stuck in back-to-back meetings all day. That was it. That was the smoking gun. The relief was overwhelming. I wasn't crazy. My intuition was right. It always was. I waited for him to come home. I didn't cook dinner. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I sat in the dark living room, the statement clutched in my hand like a verdict. The air was thick with what was about to happen. The sound of his keys in the lock made my heart hammer against my ribs. He walked in, loosening his tie. "Hey, sorry I'm late." The traffic was... I stood up, blocking his path to the kitchen. "How was the Gilded Sparrow, Owen?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Did you and her enjoy your lunch?" The confusion on his face was masterful. He was a better actor than I gave him credit for. "What are you talking about? What's the Gilded Sparrow?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, please. Don't lie to me. Not anymore." My voice rose, cracking with a rage I had been swallowing for weeks. "I know everything. The late nights, the secret texts, the showers. You think I'm stupid. You think I don't see what's been happening right under my nose." He just stared at me. He set his keys down on the console table with a deliberate, steady hand. There was no panic in his eyes, no guilt, just a deep, weary disappointment. It infuriated me. "Show me one piece of evidence, Ava," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "One text, one photo, one single thing that proves this insane accusation." His denial was so absolute, so audacious, it just confirmed everything. Innocent people get defensive. They don't get cold. They don't get clinical. "I don't need proof," I shot back, my voice trembling. "My intuition is all the proof I need, and right now it's telling me you are a liar and a cheat, and that's when it happened." Something inside him just switched off. The man I knew, the husband, who even in his distance had a warmth to him, vanished. In his place was a stranger. His shoulders didn't slump in defeat. They squared in resolve. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue anymore. "Okay, Ava," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "If that's what you believe." He walked past me, went into his home office, and shut the door, not with a slam, but with a soft, final click. The sound echoed through the apartment. It was the beginning of the end. The silence had begun. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. Living with Owen was like living with a polite, well-mannered phantom. He spoke to me only when necessary. "The dishwasher is clean. We're out of milk. I have an early meeting tomorrow." There were no more questions about my day, no more shared spaces on the couch. The apartment, once our sanctuary, became a demilitarized zone, with a Cold War raging in its silence. I interpreted his silence as an admission of guilt. A punishment. He was angry he'd been caught, and this was his way of making me suffer. I complained to Caleb over secret lunches. "He's trying to gaslight me," I'd say, and Caleb would shake his head, telling me how strong I was, how I didn't deserve that. He was my refuge, my validation. While I was finding solace in my lover's arms, Owen was working. Or so I thought. He spent hours locked in his office. I'd walk by and hear nothing but the quiet tapping of his keyboard. He was probably emailing her, I thought, arranging their next meeting. The thought stoked my anger and made my time with Caleb feel even more justified. The truth was far more methodical, far more terrifying. He wasn't talking to a lover. He was building a case. While I was operating on feelings and suspicion, he was operating on data. While I was consumed by drama, he was executing a strategy. He was a quant in his personal life, too. He was collecting, collating, and analyzing. I had no idea. I was so wrapped up in my own narrative of being the wronged wife that I couldn't see the chessboard he was setting up. I tried to provoke him to force a confrontation. I'd play music he hated. I'd accidentally leave my phone open to a friendly but innocent text from a male colleague. Nothing. He was a stone wall. His calmness was maddening. It felt like he held all the power, and it drove me insane. The breaking point arrived, not with a bang, but with a quiet knock on the door. It was a Tuesday morning. I was working from home. I opened the door to a man in a cheap suit holding a large manila envelope. "Ava Sterling," he asked. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." I stood there in the doorway, my heart turning to ice. I tore it open. The words blurred together, but a few stood out in stark, brutal clarity. Petition for dissolution of marriage, filed by Owen Sterling. 3 days ago. He had never once suggested counseling. He had never tried to talk it through. He had gone straight from denial to the nuclear option. My shock quickly curdled into a new kind of rage, a rage born of being outmaneuvered. That evening I waited for him. The divorce papers were spread out on the kitchen island like a declaration of war. When he walked in, he looked tired. Good, I thought. He should. "I guess I knew this was coming," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I have to say, this is a pretty cowardly way to handle things, Owen." He didn't look at the papers. He looked at me. He sat down at the island, his gaze heavy. "We need to talk," he said. "Now you want to talk." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Now. After you've filed legal documents, that's rich. Really mature." He rubbed his face with both hands, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw a crack in his composure. I thought maybe he was going to apologize, to admit he'd overreacted. Instead, he looked up, his eyes clear and cold, and said 2 words that stopped my world from turning. "I know." My blood ran cold. I kept my expression neutral. "You know what I know about Caleb," he said, his voice flat, matter-of-fact. Then he calmly opened his laptop and turned the screen towards me. It was all there. Screenshots of my texts with Caleb. Hundreds of them. The flirtatious jokes, the plans to meet, the intimate confessions. There were records of our meeting times cross-referenced with my calendar. There were photos of us leaving a restaurant, of me getting into his car, photos I had no idea were ever taken. It was all laid out in a meticulous, damning timeline. A project he had clearly been working on for weeks. My mind raced, trying to find an escape route, a way to spin this. In my panic, I latched onto the only weapon I thought I had left. "It wasn't a big deal," I blurted out, the words tasting like ash. "Because you were cheating on me too, that's why you were looking. You went through my phone because you knew I was right about you. You were just trying to find something to make this my fault." Owen's expression didn't change. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He just looked at me with a profound, almost pitying sadness. "No, Ava," he said, his voice impossibly calm. "I went through your phone because my wife, the woman I built a life with, accused me of cheating without a shred of proof. You said your gut was never wrong. Turns out you were right about that. There was a liar in this house. You were just looking in the wrong direction." He closed the laptop. "The lunch at the Gilded Sparrow," he continued, his voice, now laced with ice, "was with David Chen, from the risk department. He was the one who recommended me for the promotion to quant. I took him to lunch to thank him. The promotion that pays for this condo. The condo you brought your lover into while I was at work." He stood up. He walked to the hall closet and pulled out a duffel bag that was already packed. He paused at the door, turning back to me one last time. "You didn't have an affair because you were lonely, Ava. You had an affair because you preferred the drama of a secret to the quiet work of a partnership. You broke this. And I'm just cleaning up the mess." And then he was gone. I tried to control the narrative. It's what I'm good at. I called my parents, my brother, our mutual friends. I spun a careful, curated tale of a marriage that had fallen apart. "It's so sad," I told my mother, tears welling in my eyes. "We both just grew apart. We both made mistakes. There were indiscretions on both sides." I painted a picture of a mutually destructive relationship, a tragedy where no one was solely to blame. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. And for a few days, it worked. People offered sympathy. They took my side. Then came the email. Owen didn't create a group chat. That would have been too theatrical for him. He was more precise. He sent a single devastating email. The recipient list was a graveyard of my life, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, his entire family, and every single one of our close friends. The subject line was simple: the truth. There was no angry text, no explanation. Just a single password-protected PDF attachment. The password was our wedding date. A final, cruel twist of the knife. I didn't need to open it. I knew what was inside. The entire methodical dossier of my betrayal. The texts, the photos, the timeline. The fallout was swift and brutal. My phone started blowing up. Not with messages of support, but with a deafening silence. Friends I'd known for a decade stopped answering my calls. The ones who did were cold. "I can't believe you, Ava," one of them said before hanging up. My father called me. His voice, usually so warm and supportive, was filled with a shame so profound it felt like a physical blow. "I called Owen to apologize," he said, his voice heavy. "To apologize for believing you. That's not how we raised you. To lie like that. To destroy a man's reputation, to cover your own tracks." Caleb, of course, vanished. His texts stopped. My calls went to voicemail. I had served my purpose, and now I was a liability. I was utterly, completely alone. Cast as the villain in a story I thought I was directing. Now I live in our old condo, an echo-filled monument to my own destruction. Owen let me keep it in the divorce. An act of pity, I think. Sometimes I see pictures of him online, tagged by mutual acquaintances. He looks lighter. He started hiking again, something we used to do. He's smiling in pictures, surrounded by people who look at him with sympathy and respect. The loyal husband. The victim. He won. He played the long game. While I was chasing the cheap thrill of a fleeting connection, he was strategically dismantling my entire life with the same precision he used on the stock market. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted justice. He wanted to burn my reputation to the ground and salt the earth behind him. The worst part is, I can't even hate him for it. Not really, because he didn't use lies. He just used the truth. My truth. My own words, my own actions weaponized against me. People say I should just accept responsibility and move on. But they don't understand. Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I lied. But the emptiness was real. The loneliness was real. He was absent. That doesn't excuse what I did, but it was the kindling. I just lit the match. But that's not the story anyone wants to hear. In the end, when a marriage falls apart, someone has to be the villain. And whoever controls the narrative gets to decide who that is. Owen was smarter, more strategic, and he had the one thing I didn't, the facts. And now I'm the cautionary tale they tell their friends. I'm the reason they check their spouse's phone. He got a new life. And he left me buried in the ruins of our old one, with nothing but the silence to keep me company. A silence he created, a silence I now have to live in forever.